Popular British-Nigerian boxer Anthony Joshua was involved in a serious road accident that claimed 2 lives on December 29, 2025, after the vehicle he was traveling in collided with a stationary truck in Ogun State, Nigeria. Joshua sustained minor injuries and survived the crash. However, 2 of his longtime associates, coaches Sina, Ghami, and Latz, Ayodele, who were also inside the vehicle at the time, were pronounced dead at the scene. Ogun State Police arrived shortly after the incident, cordoned off the area, and began interviewing eyewitnesses as part of the standard procedure. Preliminary findings suggested that vehicles was overspeeding and attempting a dangerous overtaking maneuver before losing control. As investigations continued in the days that followed, a chilling revelation emerged. The driver of the vehicle finally disclosed something crucial, something that changed the entire understanding of how the accident had happened. But before we get into that, how did Anthony Joshua end up in Sagamu, Ogun State, all the way from Kasea Center in Miami, where he fought Jake Paul? The trip to Nigeria was supposed to be a celebration, a moment to breathe, to laugh, to feel at home again. Anthony Joshua had just come off the most profitable and talked about fight of his career, a victory that earned him a staggering $92 million after defeating YouTube-turned boxer Jake Paul. It was the kind of win fighters dream of, and there was no better place to celebrate than the land he calls home. The highly celebrated Christmas season in Nigeria was near. Dirty December was in full swing. The music, the energy, the warmth, everything was calling him home. Joshua didn't travel alone. By his side were 2 men who had walked closely with him through the hardest moments of his career. His coach, Sina, Ghami, and trainers, Latz, Ayodele, they both flew with him, not just as coaches, but as family. Aside from the celebration, Joshua was already scheduled to fight in Saudi Arabia in February, a bout that would build towards another highly anticipated clash against Tyson Fury. Training couldn't pause. Preparation couldn't stop. That was another reason his strength coach and personal trainer made the journey with him to Nigeria. None of them knew that this trip, planned with joy and purpose, would quietly become a journey of no return. When they arrived in Nigeria, the welcome was nothing short of royal. Lagos opened its arms to him. Celebrities, musicians, actors, and industry figures gathered around him. Nights were filled with laughter, music, and celebration. Dirty December was everything it promised to be. Loud, joyful, unforgettable. For days, everything felt perfect. But then Joshua made a decision to travel to Ogun State, a decision almost inevitable. This is because Joshua, though born in Watford, UK, has deep family roots in Sagamu, a quiet town in Ogun State. It was the place of his lineage, the hometown of Joshua's parents. In Nigerian culture, the new year is sacred. It's a time when people leave the cities and return to their villages to start the year grounded in tradition. For Joshua, this journey wasn't about fame or celebration. It was about reconnecting with family and extended family. So on December 29th, he set out from Lagos to Sagamu to spend the new year with his relatives. According to a family member who later spoke to the BBC, it was meant to be a simple visit, a peaceful return home. None of them knew that this short road trip would mark the final chapter of a celebration that had started with so much joy. The journey to Sagamu was made in 2-vehicle convoy, a Lexus SUV in front and a Pajero SUV behind. Anthony Joshua and his close associates were in the Lexus, while their security team followed in the Pajero. There were 4 people inside the Lexus SUV. The driver was in front. Anthony Joshua was first seated in front seat, but he later switched seats with Latif because the driver could not see clearly past Joshua's large frame. After the swap, Joshua moved to the back seat directly behind the driver. Sitting beside Joshua on his right was his longtime coach, Sina, Ghami. His personal trainer, Latz, Ayodele, was seated in the front passenger seat. Then their journey began. As the convoy moved along the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, tragedy struck. The Lexus SUV collided violently with a stationary truck, hitting it from the right-hand side. The collision occurred around 11 a.m. on Monday, December 29, 2025, in Makun, Ogun State. roughly 30 miles from Lagos. The exact location was along the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway near Danko Filling Station just before the Sagamu interchange inward Ibadan. The impact was devastating. Those seated on the right side of the vehicle, the front passenger and the man beside Joshua, bore the full force of the crash. Among those who lost their lives were Joshua's childhood friend Ayodele and his trusted fitness coach Sina, Ghami. Both men had been seated on the right side of the vehicle and were killed instantly. Anthony Joshua and the driver, who were seated on the left side of the vehicle, survived. Passerby and the police immediately arrived at a horrifying scene. The car was crushed into intensive damage. Anthony Joshua, though conscious, had sustained minor injuries and was immediately taken to the medical facility in Lagos for treatment. Investigations later suggested that Lexus SUV had been traveling above the speed limit and lost control while attempting to overtake. Images and videos from the scene show the truck parked off the tarmac, close to the inside lane of the 3-lane carriageway. The Lexus, however, veered into it with crushing force. Footage from the scene quickly spread online, capturing the raw aftermath of the crash. In one clip, Joshua appeared dazed and shirtless in the back seat. In another, he was seen speaking with emergency officials as locals gathered around the wreckage. Witnesses described him as shaking but alive, visibly struggling to process what had just happened. Anthony Joshua and the driver were immediately rushed to the hospital, but not in an ambulance, but in a police vehicle. In the days that followed, one question refused to fade. What really caused the accident? 2 days after the accident, Anthony Joshua and the driver were discharged from the hospital to continue their recovery at their family's home in Nigeria. Immediately, police officials called the driver in for questioning and a thorough investigation. Initial explanations pointed to a mechanical failure. Ogun State Police Commissioner Lanre Ogunlowo first stated that the tire on the Lexus SUV had burst while the vehicle was in motion on the highway. At the time, it appeared to be a tragic accident caused by circumstances rather than human error. But as investigations deepened, the story began to unravel. Authorities soon shifted their focus away from the vehicle itself and towards the man behind the wheel. What was once believed to be an unavoidable tire burst was now being linked to excessive speed and a dangerous overtaking maneuver. Traffic investigators concluded that the SUV lost control while attempting to overtake at high speed, a move that proved fatal. The driver, identified as 46-year-old Adeni Mobolaji Kayode, was a locally hired chauffeur. It was also discovered that the driver did not have a valid driver's license, raising serious concerns about his ability to safely drive a convoy SUV, especially one that typically travels at high speed. Within a week of the crash, officials made it clear that responsibility for the tragedy rested squarely on the driver. He was charged with multiple offenses, including dangerous driving, causing death, reckless and negligent driving, driving without due care and attention resulting in bodily harm and property damage, and driving without a valid national driver's license. Babatunde Akimbi, the police commander of Nigeria's Traffic Compliance and Enforcement Corps, confirmed that early findings showed the Lexus lost control after experiencing a tire burst linked directly to excessive speed. The burst, investigators said, was not the cause, it was the consequence. The Ogun State Police Command later confirmed that Kayode had been formally arraigned in court. The case was adjourned until January 20 for trial. He was granted bail set at 5 million naira and remanded pending the fulfillment of his bail conditions. As legal proceedings began, the focus shifted from speculation to accountability. What started as a celebration trip ended in courtrooms, investigations, and unanswered grief, leaving behind a painful reminder that a single moment on the road can change lives forever. Days after returning to London, Joshua broke his silence on social media, paying tribute to the two men he had lost. Away from cameras and arenas, he began the quiet work of grief. He visited the families of the two men he had lost, not as a world champion, but as a brother and a son. He sat with their parents, he stood beside their siblings. In one visit, he was photographed seated next to the sister of Sina, Ghami, as she held her brother's image close. With the mothers of both men present in another, Joshua was seen sitting on the floor beside Ayodele's father, choosing closeness over formality. Through these visits, it became clear that his bond with Sina, Ghami, and Latz Ayodele went far beyond boxing. They were not just members of his team, they were family. Their friendship stretched back more than 2 decades, long before world titles, sold-out arenas, or Olympic glory. Joshua met Ayodele as a child in Watford, where they grew up together before moving to North London in their teenage years. It was there they later met Sina, Ghami. What began as simple friendship, shared meals, bowling nights, football games, barbecues, and laughter slowly became a lifelong brotherhood. Before boxing entered the picture, they were just young boys spending time together, competing over games, teasing each other endlessly, and building bonds that had nothing to do with fame. That foundation never changed. Even as Joshua's career exploded, the dynamic remained the same: competitive, playful, grounded, and deeply loyal. Ayodele carved his own path, a former footballer known for his relentless energy. He later became a personal trainer and fitness advocate, dedicating his work to both physical and mental well-being. He was disciplined, generous, and deeply spiritual, while remaining a constant presence in Joshua's inner circle and training camp. Sina Ghami worked with Joshua from the very beginning of his professional journey, specializing in recovery and rehabilitation. He was meticulous, hardworking, and trusted with Joshua's body more than anyone else. Ghami's care extended beyond sports. He checked on everyone around him, remembered families, and carried a warmth that stayed with people long after conversations ended. Despite working with athletes across different sports, his devotion to Joshua remains personal and unwavering. Both men were present through Joshua's rise, from a teenage novice to Olympic gold medalists to 2-time heavyweight world champion. They were there for the biggest nights in British boxing history, yet never sought the spotlight themselves. They brought humor into tense fights, camps, turning pressure into laughter through games, competitions, and constant banter. Even in victory, they kept things light. Their final days together were spent the same way many others had been: training, competing, laughing, and sharing moments that felt ordinary at the time. Just weeks before the crash, they were together again for Joshua's latest fight in Miami. It would be their last celebration as a group. Even in the final weeks of their lives, nothing about that dynamic had changed. The absence left by Ayodele and Sina Ghami is impossible to measure. They were not men who sought attention or status. They did not try to benefit from Joshua's fame or elevate themselves through association. They were present because they belonged there, because friendship placed them there long before success ever could. Their deaths have left those around them with a stark reminder that moments we assume will repeat forever can end without warning. For Joshua, that realization cuts deepest. He survived the crash. His body will heal, but survival carries its own weight, the burden of memory and of what-ifs. Every future achievement will now carry their absence alongside it. And yet, their presence remains in the routines Joshua keeps, in the discipline he maintains, in the humor he carries into serious moments, in the loyalty he shows to the people around him, in the way he chooses to live moving forward. Sina Ghami and Latz Ayodele were not just part of the boxing journey, they were part of his life. In the end, that is how they will be remembered. Not just as men lost in a tragic accident, but as brothers who helped build a champion and friends who mattered far more than the sport ever could. For Anthony Joshua, the road ahead is uncertain, but one truth is clear. The legacy of Sina, Ghami, and Kevin Latz, Ayodele, will continue to live through him, not just in the ring, but in the loyalty, gratitude, and humanity they helped instill long before the world was watching.